Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And really, I hope you are in good spirits, and please continue to take very good care of yourselves during this time. Continuing with my journey through the works of John Carpenter, the one and only John Carpenter, it is with great pleasure that I am able to talk with you, share with you some comments that I have with respect to his film that was released in 1988. And this is a really great one. They're all great, of course, but this one has a particular power that I can't wait to talk to you about. What is the film, you ask? It is none other than They Live. This is the film that stars Roddy Piper, Keith David, Meg Foster, and others. And this is a powerhouse of a film that so wonderfully and remarkably has aged so well. It is so relevant and it is resonant with respect not only to the times that it was made in the late 1980s, but it still has a very direct power and impact that can be felt in the context of today's times. And I think on top of that, we have a very exciting, dark entertainment that is a sci-fi thriller in some aspects, that still retains its wit, that still has a heart, and that still commands attention. And that's due, of course, not only to the greatness of the overall filmmaking that we have now come to expect from the one and only John Carpenter, but it comes also from the performances, and in particular, we have the performance by the great Roddy Piper in one of those mesmerizing screen performances. It is really something else indeed. So this is the film They Live. What we have here is the Shout Factory, Scream Factory Blu-ray release of the film They Live. This is Region A. And Shout Factory, Scream Factory has done a lot of work with the films of John Carpenter, They Live being an example. And as per usual, the special features are really worthwhile. They are, so first we have an interview with John Carpenter called Independent Thoughts, and this is about 10 minutes, and he talks about the status of Alive Films, and he talks about the nature of the production, what he was thinking about in terms of the production. He was thinking about it in terms of class, in terms of the current situation in the United States, and the idea of combining that with a sense of a science fiction story. He talks about the source material and how he tried to adapt it into a potential film. He talks about certain aspects of the filmmaking, like the role of Jeff Imada and others. And of course he talks about Roddy Piper and the like, and he talks about some other key sequences in the film, which I'll try to get to later in this video. It's of course, as with anything else, an interview with Carpenter is truly gold, and so this is great to have. So that's the interview with John Carpenter. Then we have a 5-minute interview, which is called Woman of Mystery, and this is with Meg Foster, who also appears in the film in a very significant role. And to see her speak up in such glowing terms and with great warmth and affection for this film, and to hear her talk about it like this is just a great thing. And she adds a really nice down-to-earth perspective, and she adds a little bit of insight into the character that she plays in the film. And so to have this is fantastic. So this is the Meg Foster interview. And then we also have a combined interview with 3 different people. This is with the director of photography, Gary B. Kibbe, and then stunt coordinator, Jeff Imada, and then co-composer, Alan Howarth. And the title of this entire supplement is called Watch, Look, Listen, the Sights and Sounds of They Live. And so we have, for instance, the director of photography, Gary Kibbe, talking about how he got into this particular film in the first place and certain other details of the production. Then we have Jeff Imada, the stunt coordinator, talking about not only his role in this terms of the stunts, but also his role in terms of who he played or what he played in the film itself. And then also there's the co-composer Alan Howarth, who talks about his working relationship with John Carpenter and how they came up, or how the music was engendered, and what was the genesis of those particular themes, etc. So all in all, it's a very useful and insightful and great set of interviews combined into this one supplement. So that's also very worthwhile. The total is about 11 minutes. And then we have another supplement, which is called Man vs. Aliens. And this is an interview with the co-star of the film, Keith David. And this is another interview that's 11 minutes. And this is good because, as some of you may know, Keith David also appeared in the film The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. So in this interview, which is found as a supplement on this Blu-ray, Keith David talks a little bit about his role in The Thing, and talks about the nature of that role and how he played it. Then he talks about the how he first got hold of this particular role in They Live, and also John Carpenter and certain concerns perhaps that John Carpenter might have had about the script and the character that Keith David played, etc. Whether John Carpenter got it right, so to speak. And Keith David, I think, also speaks in very warm, complimentary terms about John Carpenter, about Roddy Piper, and about some key sequences in the film, which again I'll try to get to later in this video. Another highly recommended interview, this time with Keith David. This is about 11 minutes. And then we have a original making of featurette, which was a short featurette, about 8 minutes, which was made around the time of the film's release. And so we have on the spot, behind the scenes footage, seeing how the film was made in terms of particular scenes. We also have an on-set interview with Roddy Piper. He's shirtless, and he's talking about how he met John Carpenter at WrestleMania 3. Because John Carpenter is a big wrestling fan, and so that's also very insightful. So in one way, this featurette could also be seen as kind of a sit-down interview with Roddy Piper, as well as a sit-down interview with John Carpenter himself. He also adds certain details as to what he's thinking. Again, he brings in the element of class. He brings in the element of a kind of political revolution and that sort of thing. So another very insightful supplement. And then there is another supplement which is gathering all the footage that was used for the making of certain TV commercials that were then used as part of the background or the decor in the film itself. You know, the film has TV and has certain commercials that are played. Well, here we have a supplement that shows the actual full commercials as they would have played in real time on TV, as filmed by Larry Sulkis. And so this is another interesting insight into the world that is created by They Live, this time through the TV. And as you know from watching the film, TV he forms a very, how should I put it, somewhat significant role in the whole context of this particular story. So this is also a very interesting supplement to have. And then we have another supplement, which is a stills gallery, which you press it and it has it just runs automatically for about 2 minutes through particular stills and photographs. And then we have a trailer section, which has the original theatrical trailer for They Live. And then we have the Halloween 2 trailer, and then Halloween 3 trailer. The Halloween 3 trailer, actually there are 2 trailers for Halloween 3. So there's a teaser trailer and then there's an actual theatrical trailer. So that's interesting. So you have They Live trailer, and then you have Halloween 2 trailer, and you have 2 Halloween 3 trailers. And also there is an extra supplement with respect to the TV spots regarding They Live. So those are the promotional materials. And then last, but certainly not least, with respect to the film itself, we have a running commentary, which is optional, which is with John Carpenter and Roddy Piper. And it is such a delightful commentary. It's wonderful to hear the beautiful rapport and camaraderie that exists between these two gentlemen, and it's really nice to hear. And some of the anecdotes that, for instance, Roddy Piper gives or John Carpenter give are really splendid, utterly splendid. Roddy Piper also has a lovely kind of, he gives not a speech necessarily, but he gives this rather detailed dedication to John Carpenter, and he just talks about how much working with John Carpenter meant to him, how it positively affected his wrestling career and other things, and certain scenes that there were certain difficulties with, and how John Carpenter really tried to encourage and support Roddy Piper, because Roddy Piper himself acknowledges that he wasn't a professional trained actor, but John Carpenter really supported him and helped him along the way. And so these sorts of stories are really wonderful. And I should also say that John Carpenter has some really great stories too, about the production, and also little background details about Jeff Yamada, about how Hacksaw Jim Duggan saw the film and what was his reaction, his love of wrestling, certain setups that were made, etc. So really wonderful, warm, down-to-earth, just a commentary as though you're just sitting there talking with friends. So it's lovely to hear. And John Carpenter remains very honest but also modest, and Roddy Piper remains very laid back but still down to earth, and also very honest and very jovial. So that is a great commentary track if you haven't heard it already. So that is the commentary track that is available with this particular release, that is with John Carpenter and Roddy Piper. Okay, my friends, so that's it as far as the supplements are concerned. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about this film with a little bit more detail. So if you have not seen the film yet, then I suggest that you turn off this video and watch the film if you can. And after you've watched the film, you can always come back to this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about this really remarkable and pointed and still effective film directed by John Carpenter. The film is They Live. Okay, so you're back, which means that you don't mind me talking with some detail about this film, They Live. And oh gosh, what a brilliant film we have here. Now, as I was trying to indicate before, I think this all hangs and it's centered upon, of course, the character of Nada, played by the one and only Roddy Piper. And this is such a remarkable performance for many reasons, because it feels on the one hand like Roddy Piper is bringing a lot of his own personal experience to the film, whatever that means. And you get a sense of this in the commentary, but on the one hand he does bring a certain Roddy Piper-ness to the role. He has a certain physicality that is undeniable. He has a certain presence and aura that is also undeniable, and it's almost impossible to separate the man from his wrestling persona and his very renowned career as a professional wrestler. So there's that. But at the same time, it is so amazing to think that this is also a wholly formed performance of a character that is Nada in this world of They Live. And to see him in that character, inhabit this character, and to see the character struggle, to see the character think and work out certain things that are occurring as they are progressing. And remember, we as the audience are learning the things that are happening as he is learning them. And there are some amazing sequences about how he's starting to pick up information about what's going on here. When he first gets the sunglasses and he starts to survey the city around him, and he realizes that there is some really odd goings on in terms of subliminal messaging, and of course in terms of the hidden ghouls as they're described on the commentary, the alien menace, or the sort of unknown alien invasion that becomes known and becomes detectable when you put on these special glasses. And so as he's learning information, so do we as the audience. And so we are in many respects depending a lot on how Nada, as played by Roddy Piper, reacts to things and shows his surprise and shows his shock and shows how he deals with the situation. And it has to be kind of a gradual progression in order for us to really be able to follow him and sympathize with him. And I think he does that extremely well. He registers surprise just well, and it builds to how he ends up trying to, at least on the spot anyway, handle the situation after he is confronted by certain police officers, but he subdues those police officers. Then he is able to get some weapons, and he goes into a certain building, I think it's a bank, and then he has the famous line that he gives, I have come here to chew bubblegum, and right. So this is a very great performance. Oh, and I'm all out of bubblegum. And so to have this layering of performance provided so well by Roddy Piper, of course under the direction of John Carpenter, although John Carpenter does acknowledge that that famous line that Roddy Piper gives about being all out of bubblegum, that is a line that Roddy Piper actually authored. So that is all Roddy Piper's ingenuity, which is a really great thing indeed, and that's probably the most iconic line in the film. But again, my point is that I think Roddy Piper delivers a truly fantastic performance that is so human and is so understandable because of its human frailties. One thing can be said is he has a real sense of sort of personal mission as these developments occur, and that sense of personal mission seems to grow in stature based on his own earnestness and trying to figure out what the heck is going on in this particular situation. And while he doesn't necessarily know exactly what to do, and he doesn't necessarily go through with the final act of the film with a concrete plan in mind, he is still very forthright and very on his toes, and he knows how to act. He knows kind of what to do, instinctually anyway, and which I think is an indication of a really great character trait that is belonging to Nada, which is really wonderful. And there's also a really nice, nice, or perhaps a better way to describe it, a really very understandable, almost human frailty that Roddy Piper gives to the performance. And this is how this is personified or exemplified, in particular, how he responds to the Keith David character, and also how he responds to the Meg Foster character. I mean, I think one of the great twists of the film is how the Meg Foster character ends up turning out to be in the film. And although she is human, based on the fact that we see her through the sunglass lens from Nada's point of view, and we see that she is not an alien, we still realize that she has made, in many respects, a sort of deal with the devil. And so And so that leads to the betrayal, which leads to the ultimate disappointment that Nada feels at the very end, on the rooftop, in the final climactic moment. But he still realizes that he has one last trick up his sleeve. Really, he does, and he follows through with a final act of bravery, at the cost of his life, of course. But still, even though he expresses, or he seems to exhibit a certain sense of human frailty, as shown by his relationship, or his, let's say, his attraction, if you will, with this woman who will end up betraying him. Nonetheless, he still has a certain sense of forthright earnestness that carries through in the end, and ultimately it has that sense of hope, if you will, at the very end, given the situation with the aliens and what he has done for the human race and for everyone around him. Again, even at the cost of his life. So there's a certain heroic martyrdom almost at play here. Indeed, he really is a true hero in not only this film, but also in the Carpenter universe. And then I mentioned also the relationship he has with the characters around him, but in particular with the Keith David character. And this is a very key relationship, and I think it's expressed, of course, most forcefully in what has to be one of the most famous sequences in this film, which is the very long fight sequence between the Keith David character and the Roddy Piper character in the back lot. And this is essentially a fight that has a purpose, because, as we know, Nada is trying to get people to believe what it is he's seeing, and no one seems to be believing him, or no one is willing to listen to him, or he is being chased by the bad guys, and so he is sort of on the run. So he is really losing hope very fast in the particular situation that he finds himself in, and Keith David character is his sort of only hope at that point. But the only way to convince him, of course, to put on the glasses, because he remains stubborn, and he doesn't want to put on the glasses, obviously. The only way that he can try to convince him, hopefully, is this idea of having a fist fight. And they go at it very, very long, very, very hard, and very grueling battle. That is a real street fight, if you will, in the sense that they are punching at each other, and you feel each shot, and you feel each blow. And of course, you realize that it is a movie fight on the one hand, but it is unlike any other kind of Hollywood movie fight in that you can actually see these guys really hurt, and they are really under a lot of intense sort of passion. Each one feels very passionate about his personal stance in this particular fight. And both sides, either side, I think, is perfectly understandable. Keith David's position, I think, is very reasonable and understandable. And Roddy Piper's position is also reasonable and understandable. So it's not like you have a bad guy and a good guy in this fight. Both guys here have a reasonable position that they occupy at the start and during the fight as it progresses. And oh gosh, the way it progresses, there is a lot of pain. There is a lot of sweat. There's a really beautiful moment where, after the windshield has been broken by Nada almost accidentally, he just bursts out in sort of a childish laughter, as though these are like just boys playing. And of course, Keith David didn't really like the joke, and he just went at it again. But still, there's a really charming moment of humanity there. It's like these are really boys playing on the one hand, and yet they are really fighting it out, really. And then I would say on the one hand that perhaps it might be seen as being not necessarily a Hollywood fight, in the sense that we don't have these guys that seem to exhibit any special powers or superhuman strength or anything like that. But it also is a heightened realistic fight. It is not a down-to-earth realistic fight in the sense that we do also see sort of wrestling moves come into play, and we see this sort of a battle or a fight between these two that just continues on and is a street brawl on the one hand, but it is also a very strong reference to professional wrestling. And by now, of course, we understand that John Carpenter is and always was a fan of professional wrestling. And then to have Roddy Piper in this film, I mean, one obviously couldn't go through this film without having a direct reference to wrestling, and here we have it, in all of its glory. This is really one of those great fights. It's a physical fight, and it's also a fight of philosophies also, in terms of knowledge, Nada representing a real direct yearning to know and to let others know. And then the Keith David position is like something like a sort of reasonable sense of complacency and not necessarily wanting to be bothered, which is also a very human reaction, I think. And it's also something that is at the very fore of the thematic discussion of this film. And speaking of which, then, we can go to what I think are the very key thematic elements of this film, namely, of course, the idea of a kind of class warfare or a class struggle. We have, for the most part, sort of working class Nada and that level, and not only that, but a particular portion of that class that is struggling to find a job, maybe not necessarily having a home, maybe temporarily homeless, and so needing some shelter. And that's where the whole situation comes in with the particular group and certain ties to a kind of revolutionary underground movement that we find more developed along the narrative in the latter half of the film. But in terms of this discussion of class, of course, we have this on one level, and then on a different level we have people in sort of upper middle class or higher, and these are usually represented by the people or the aliens that are disguised as people, because all of the aliens that we see disguised as people usually are aliens disguised as people in very rich fashion or suits, or there's one particular scene in where we have an actual alien conference with some people, some human beings, and the understanding is that humans that are in this room represent the wealthy class and the elites, and they have kind of sold out in order to gain more personal wealth, material wealth from these aliens. And the idea that is expressed is also that the human race, if they choose to, can buy themselves out. Their loyalty can be bought, and this seems to be available to anyone who is willing to give up their loyalty in order to allow the aliens to occupy this planet. So there is so much complex layering here, it's not just a question of class, although that's a very key component, don't get me wrong. It's not just a question of class struggle, but that is also a key component, don't get me wrong. But it's also a sense of almost class mobility in an interesting way. The idea that one can move up or move to different classes if one quote unquote sells out in the context of this particular story. And I think that's a very interesting comment if one wants to extrapolate that into a wider context. I think that's a very interesting comment that John Carpenter seems to be making there. And we have this, of course, layered onto a science fiction, almost similar to Invasion of the Body Snatchers type of story that has that has a very bleak feel to it. It has a certain sense of hopelessness to it. It also has a certain sense of paranoia. And there is a sense of doom and gloom. The end of the world is nigh. And it's up to the instincts and the efforts of a couple of people to try to bring the whole system down, even if it means a sort of a battle that they probably won't walk away from alive. Whether they realize that or not is another question, of course. But this is really, in many respects, a hopeless battle in one sense, because Nada is obviously totally outnumbered and outgunned and the like, but he still has a certain strength of will, force of character that really drives him through to his ultimate conclusion, which is, as I suggested earlier, a very heroic one. But the reason why I mentioned these ideas of paranoia, of dread, of menace, of not knowing what's going on, of this idea of being attacked or being controlled on a subliminal level, this idea that maybe there's this feeling or hunch that we have that there's something off about the society, and that sort of thing, how there is a real sense of not necessarily it's not necessarily a martial law police state that is being depicted in the film, in the universe of They Live, but there's also a strong sense of government authority, and how it's being imposed, and how certain groups of individuals or groups within a certain class are essentially being thrown out or being attacked for reasons of the plot, of course, in terms of trying to find this underground movement. But there's obviously a sort of a statement about class and class oppression that John Carpenter is definitely making here. And so that is, I think, undeniable and quite a powerful one to make. But then to tie it also with John Carpenter's previous works, in particular films like The Thing, Escape from New York, etc. I think we do have this sense of paranoia here that is played out in the sense of who can you trust, who do you know that really is who they say they are, and even if they are who they say they are, how do we know that we can still trust that person? So there are double layers of betrayal and paranoia at work here that I think remind us or harken back to earlier discussions and treatments of this very powerful theme of paranoia that we've seen, for instance, in The Thing. Here it's also present in this film, They Live, and it's treated very, very well and very, very forcefully, and with great impact and much care and thought. And so we have this linkage to John Carpenter past, but also there are other themes as well, or not themes necessarily, but other ways in which this film can be seen as a John Carpenter film, in the sense that it is a blending of certain genres of cinema. As I mentioned, there's a science fiction horror element to it. There's a sort of paranoia mystery element to it. There's also a kind of Western element to it in terms of the Roddy Piper character, and he is almost a loner person. Nada almost might seem like a man with no name, and he walks along the landscape there, the modern day landscape, with a wonderful theme, the John Carpenter, Alan Howarth music, of course, but there's a wonderful theme that has a very Western-ish feel to it. So this does feel also like borrowing from the Western genre, as well as the science fiction genre and the action-adventure genre. And also layering it with a sense of paranoia and dread that we also see from films like The Thing, etc. And also there is a kind of dark, brooding dread. It could be seen as apocalyptic, of course, in terms of the way it ends, but as I would suggest, there is a sense of hope that the truth might come out, and we do see the truth coming out in visual terms, and also very directly in the way in which the aliens have been, in effect, their cover has been blown. And so there is a sense of hope, even after all this dread and despair has occurred. And don't get me wrong, even though there is a sense of despair, there's also a wit and a charm and a kind of funny feel to it that I think is that the performance in particular by Roddy Piper really lends itself to. Thus, it's not all totally doom and gloom, of course, but while there are those themes there's still a sense of heart and dare I say it, yes, hope even prior to the end. And so I think that's, again, all down to Roddy Piper. If I were to try to bring this conversation full circle back to where I started, which was with respect to the performances. So with that, my friends, this is, in a nutshell, what I think the film They Live means to me, and how it has affected me, and the way that I see it play out even now. And as I say, it does have a resonance and a relevance to the times that I think we live in today, in terms of kind of a discussion on class and class struggles, and also a sense of paranoia, and a sense of not necessarily knowing who to trust, and also this idea of what does it mean to enact a kind of revolutionary spirit? Is the revolution really something that is worthwhile, practical, or is it impractical? What are the ramifications of this, etc., etc.? And so I think this is all here, and it's done in a way that is so John Carpenter. It is really calling attention to the themes that are being played out, but calling attention to it in a way that is still playing with the genre, really loving the sense of cinema, and really giving room and space for the performers and actors to act and develop and grow and express themselves, and all done also under the banner of entertainment, and for the purposes to entertain and to have some fun in that movie theater. And so this is all, I think, very characteristic of John Carpenter. He shows that he is a filmmaker that is also having a lot on his mind, and he wants to try to express these ideas as best as he can, but still do it in that oh so wonderful John Carpenter way. So this is one of the most effective films in John Carpenter's career. It is certainly one of my favorite films by John Carpenter, and I never tire of this. Every time I visit it, I marvel at how well it holds up, and how many surprises it has, and the kind of effort and sweat and real life that you can tell everyone involved really gave to this film. And it's a wonderful thing to see the final result as it plays out in the final product. This is the film They Live. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. So what do you think of the film? Do you like it? Do you not like it? In any event, my friends, I would very much love to hear what it is you have to say. So thank you very much for your time again. And until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. So thank you very much again, my friends. Be well, take good care of yourselves. Warmest regards to all. And cheers.